All right, hi everybody. Welcome to the Psychedelic Light Show review. This is episode 5. I'm your host, Steve Pavlovsky of Liquid Light Lab. I'm here with my co-host, Chris Samardiszch of the Brotherhood of Light. And today we have a very special episode, a very special guest. We have the wonderful Joshua White of the Joshua Light Show. And Chris has provided a very cool slideshow for us about the Fillmore East, and then Joshua's going to tell us about it, and tell us about the Joshua Light Show and the venue, and it's just going to be a very interesting show. So, thanks for joining us, Chris.
Okay, so this is the Fillmore East show, which I put together, but Joshua gave me a ton of great slides and pictures. So it's kind of a combination of the two of us here. So really thankful for him to give these to us, to make the show even better, to turn our audience on to what the Fillmore East was all about. So I'm going to go. Are you ready to go, Josh?
Yeah, I am. I want to say that I would be happy to give Steve and Chris the pictures, because it's the only way that anyone can really visualize what we do. We can talk about it forever, but every time you see a picture, you know a little more. We're also very grateful because I took a lot of pictures. I documented. There was always somebody in the Joshua Light Show whose job was to take pictures. So I have good pictures from a time it was really hard. We've also been given the right to just show some pictures from two great photographers. One is Amelie Rothschild. Amelie was a part of the Joshua Light Show, and she continued as a photographer. And she also made several books, one of which is about the Fillmore East. And what makes her books really distinctive is that she wandered around backstage with not just a 35mm camera, but it had a big strobe on it. So when she took a picture, it was a picture. I mean, you saw everything. It looked like something from the cover of a newspaper. And the other, of course, is the great Elliot Landy. Elliot Landy was the first really great rock photographer that I met. And by the time the Fillmore opened, he'd already gone up to Woodstock and was taking pictures with the band and Bob Dylan, and you'd be shocked at how many of these iconic pictures. So Amelie Rothschild and Elliot Landy contributed to this show. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah, we would be nowhere without the work of all the photographers. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, you guys ready to go?
Let's do it.
There you go, man. Talk about
this. So this is a very important picture to me, because I had met Glenn McKay in the summer of 1967, when my company, which was primarily a lighting services discotheque company, was hired to go to Canada to help figure out how Bill Graham could bring what he does from the ballroom to a theater. And Glenn and his partner, Jerry Abrams, were headlights. They were already legendary. And I figured out a way that they could do their show on a rear projection screen. And my company filled in the blanks and did everything else. And I also called the lights for the show, which was just basically changing colors. And what I didn't know was that Glenn McKay and Jerry Abrams, who had been a successful light show, were breaking up. And they really didn't get along. And Glenn was very friendly, long ponytails from Kansas City, big guy, very outgoing. And he loved us. And when we came back to New York in the beginning of September, Glenn came along and we made a deal. We would build him a new light show, which was not very complicated, but it was more complicated than he could handle. He would teach us the mysteries of the liquids. And this is just one of many pictures in the studio where he's just showing me the basics. And everything that we learned how to do it by hand, we learned that night.
And this was in Toronto, or did this come back with you guys?
We met him in Toronto, but he came back to New York with us.
Okay, cool.
And we built him a new light show, which was really about the mechanics. It was unbelievably hard if you weren't a mechanic or you didn't know how to mount a color wheel on a motor. It was hard, unless you had those skills, in which case it was easy.
Yeah, it still is a little bit, for people who aren't familiar with those types of mechanics.
Right. It always was, and it always will be.
It's a simple machine, but it's not. Yeah,
it is. But in those days, there were less options. There was a war going on in Vietnam, so you couldn't just buy stuff and expect delivery. There was a lot of strangeness. So we just happened to know what to do because we'd been building these machines for discotheques.
Sure.
And Glenn just gave us he just gave us the inside look that oil and water don't mix, which we kind of knew. Here's how you dye them. Here's one of some things you can do. We just spent, several hours with him, but that was all we needed. And that's all I think anybody needs is just a little direct instruction. And then we started doing it. We kept trying. A few months later, we had formed our own light show and we were doing performances.
Cool.
Okay, here we go. Let's go to your first posters. There you go.
Oh, wow.
So the one on the right is literally our first performances. It was in December of 1967. There had been a lot of success from Monterey Pop, the movie. That had kind of set a certain standard for a celebration of sound and light, but nobody knew quite how to do it. And this was a theater that had what was traditionally a dead week before Christmas. So instead of putting on theater presentations, they turned the whole week into a celebration of sound and light with the Joshua Light Show. So we worked with all those performers behind them on the screen. And it was the first time that we'd ever done anything really big as a light show, and it was very successful. Immediately after that, I started looking for gigs. And it turned out that Crawdaddy magazine was going to start promoting shows at an old theater called the Anderson, also on the Lower East Side.
Which we see there.
And that's a poster from those shows. They hired us.
On the left side. Cool.
Right.
Okay, here, let's go to Frank Zappa, who's playing at your first show.
This is literally my most iconic picture because we didn't know what it looked like. We're behind the screen. We felt it was good, but when you're behind a rear projection screen, you're really getting not much of the light, and this thing is shiny. You have to be confident that if it looks okay behind, it's going to look great out front. And we had our photographer, part of our group, and he sat in the front row of the balcony, and he must have taken 3 rolls of film. He must have taken 100 pictures to get this one. Very hard to do, but it's followed me around for over 50 years. And ironically, it's the one that people choose every time there's another book, or there was recently a show in New York about Bill Graham, and they're trying to find 1 or 2 pictures to illustrate what a light show looked like. This 52-year-old picture is what they choose. I'm very proud of it. I love it.
Okay, let's go to your buddy Bill Graham here. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Bill Graham came to New York, and he didn't want, we were friendly with him, but he didn't want to open a theater in New York. It was very simple. He was afraid. Bill was a failed actor in New York. Not a lot of people know, but he literally was a Holocaust survivor. Came to America when he was a young child, totally blended in, learned the language and everything. And he was an actor, and he was a waiter, and he was in the army during Korea. He was a big success in San Francisco with his ballroom, and he was making a lot of money. He didn't want to come to New York. He was afraid of failure, but he had me and all of my friends, and we all wanted him to. And finally, after these shows at the Anderson sold out, we took him there and said, Bill, look, they're selling out every night. It's people you found. So how about it? And he finally said yes. And we all pitched in to help. I mean, I painted the box office. I fixed the marquee, independent of the light show, which I wasn't worried about because I knew it would be good. And what's ironic about this picture is this was taken the day of opening night. I'm down behind Bill. I've just climbed down the ladder. I've repaired the marquee. I've measured for the broken glass. And I've put up the Joshua Light Show because I'm no fool. And that stayed up there. It was just great. And we were very proud. And there's the young, almost innocent Bill Graham. The shows sold out immediately. I'll give you a little quick side story, which is in March 8th of 1968. I had put up Big Brother / Janis, because Janis had already made a big reputation with the Monterey Pop film and word of mouth and everything. And it was great. And she played on the radio a lot. And they made me take down Janis because the group felt they were an ensemble and it was Big Brother and she shouldn't be set out. And of course, that was part of the West Coast, San Francisco sensibility. I have to tell you, it didn't last for long, but for this show, we took down Janis.
Oh, wow.
Let's go to the crazy sold out Fillmore. There it is.
Yep, there it is. Now these photographs don't necessarily follow a timeline, but the realities are the same. So there's the Fillmore, a former movie theater, a former Yiddish theater from early in the 20th century. And it was built the way a lot of the theaters were built then. There was a small building in the front, like a loft building.
Yep.
And you walked all the way through, and the actual theater was on a side street in the back.
Yeah. So where you see the fire escape coming down, that's the actual theater.
That was the theater. And it was a big theater. It was 2,700 seats. I mean,
Wow.
the Metropolitan Opera House is 3,000, 2,700 seats.
Wow.
That's a lot of seats to fill.
Yeah.
And we did right away.
Okay.
And
now
this is just showing people lined up for one show. I'm not sure what, but it had this kind of attraction to people.
Yeah.
Okay, what is this one next door here?
Okay, next door to the Fillmore, there was a couple of things that just happened that just were part of the good luck story of the Fillmore. There's the theater. It's on 2nd Avenue. 2nd Avenue is still part of the Lower East Side. It's still an old Jewish community. It's a Ukrainian, Polish community. It's definitely ethnic down there. 6th Street and 2nd Avenue. Right next door is a dairy restaurant, Ratner's. Dairy just meant they didn't serve meat or bacon or anything.
There it is.
You could have eggs and potatoes and coffee, open 24/7. Go in, these grumpy old waiters would wait on you. You could sit there all night long and talk. And I got to tell you, for an arts experience and an art scene to work eventually, as we did, till 3 and 4 in the morning with the Grateful Dead, and then all be able to roll into a dairy restaurant and regular dairy restaurant and sit around a table and talk was the best. That was one thing. Above Ratner's was an old loft building that had been bought by NYU. And they turned that into the Tisch School of the Arts. So the Tisch School of the Arts and the Fillmore East literally shared a wall. Many of the people I went to school with, I'd gone to theater school at Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh. And many of the people that I went to theater school with now, in order to stay out of the Army, were teaching, including at NYU.
I was there
during
the draft.
From Carnegie Tech were there. So they'd come down and they'd visit. And like anything else, it had such high energy, they got drawn in. And then their students began to come in. So that after the first couple of months, our stagehands were all people with master's degrees, who just didn't see anything in the theater that was as exciting as what was going on the stage of the Fillmore. So between the restaurant we could all sit down in and the crew that was really smart, and Bill Graham, who just booked acts like nobody had seen, including the Joshua Light Show, which he paid for. We just had this amazing thing happen. It just happened. The world found us. We didn't. There was no way to advertise. The world found us.
Let's go inside the Fillmore. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, let's go inside. All
right. So here we are in the Fillmore. You can see the Joshua Light Show on the screen. You can see the performers, and very important, the audience for this show was seated. Didn't mean they didn't jump up in the air, but that automatic thing that we all see now. For a while it was called festival seating. Now it's just general, and everybody just starts to go crazy right away. Here, the audience came in, there was an usher, they bought reserved seats, the usher had a flashlight, wore a uniform. So everybody knew that they could sit down and see the show. What happened later, was really up to the way the audience moved them, but it began in a polite way, as opposed to shows where the audience is literally cheering from the first note of music. Right. To give you an idea of how primitive everything was, on the left was one balcony. There were two little boxes. One on the left held the lighting equipment, and on the right the sound equipment. They were very small. And there's a blow up here, and just for those of you that are interested, you can see the dimmers. They were old mechanical dimmers, nothing subtle about them at all. I don't think the lighting designer, who was originally Chipmunk, had more than 24 of those things, and they were hard. You pulled hard on those levers, but they made the lights move. But they couldn't quite make them do what lights did subsequently, because you had to really work hard to make them do anything. Plus, there weren't any special lights. There weren't any moving lights. We had to invent it.
Yeah, I saw that you guys have some par cans up there, which for the time were actually quite innovative to take cans and hang them like that. As common as that is now.
And this is further along. This is probably after a year and a half of the Fillmore's run, where Bill was always invested a little money, and he invested money in just better lights. The first lights were fine for what they did, but they were theatrical and motion picture lights. They weren't these specially designed lights. Everything that happened at the Fillmore in 1968 was the literally ground zero for everything that happened after that. I know this picture is from maybe 69 or later, because I'm seeing a monitor wedge at the feet of the conga player, and they were brand new.
Yeah, that had not. This is the wedges have not been really. Yeah, that was a newfangled invention.
There was 2 speakers on either side of the stage.
Yeah,
but the idea of a separate monitor mix and wedges and all those things that was to come. The 2 speakers, you can see 2 speakers. They're just standard Altec speakers, the biggest ones available, that one guy chose to rent, and that was the sound. There's no special sound pointing up. They hadn't figured any of that out yet.
Cool. If we can, and before, while we stay on the slide before we go to the next one, I think it's, one of 2 very interesting contrasts between the Fillmore East and the West Coast venues, in that all the West Coast venues were ballrooms. Yes. So this is quite a different experience from walking into a big ballroom where everybody's walking around freely. Here it's the Fillmore it's a theater. It's sort of, even as I think we heard Dickie Betts talk about how it raised rock and roll to almost high theater, and here at the Fillmore,
it did certainly enough for the bands to get going. For one thing, there was in San Francisco, which we knew, it was explained to us that part of the reason for the light shows was to provide lighting, because those ballrooms were dingy and old, and
exactly.
And turn off all the lights, and on came the light show. Light show usually had a follow spot that they ran. And they began really as lighting and stretching the experience out. But in New York, it was pure theater. And fortunately, everybody that worked on the stage, and certainly the light show, were all theater trained.
Theater
so we
folks,
understood. When the show began, the show began. There was no little things happened, but it had a different discipline. And it wasn't that we were trying to do anything to be better than the ballroom shows. It was just that we had a different assignment.
What you guys did was had one show at like 6:30 to 9 or whatever, and then 9.
No, it was 8 and 11. 2 shows.
8 and 11.
2 shows a weekend, and then they began to add other kinds of shows during the week. Like there was a jazz night, there was a night for new bands and new light shows.
Well, there was I saw the light show audition form.
That's right.
That somebody posted
for someone
Wednesday
from the light
nights.
show, me or one of the people. Mentored
Tuesday
the
night.
band. Mark Rubenstein, Big Light Show. We mentored them. They were high school kids. We were college graduates. It wasn't that big a difference in age, but we understood. This picture is unusual because it's extremely rare for someone to take a picture of the audience and the screen and everything else. It's probably a flat picture.
That's why I found it. Put it
that's
in here.
That looks like an anomaly picture. It's great. It really tells the story.
Okay,
let's also see how they had just discovered how to mic the amps, because prior to that, the function of a PA system was to allow the vocalist to be heard over the amps. Well, the musicians, they just kept turning it up, and the PA systems could only go so high before they fed back. But clearly, by the time they did this, they'd begun to deal with the sound as a whole rather than as PA, and that's what I'm seeing in this picture.
Right.
Yeah, they're miking the bass. Okay, let's go to the poster here. There's a famous one.
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful piece of art.
It is. That's the one that I actually have in my house. It was after we started. The first posters we made we didn't understand or really have the groove or the kind of people that made those amazing West Coast posters. So there's this hodgepodge of different styles, but finally we found a graphic artist who, of course, we went to Carnegie Tech with, so it was easier, but he got it. He understood. Remember, this is all made by hand. All those letters are put down one at a time. And he just found the design for the Jimi Hendrix experience. And it's amazing.
It works so well.
You may be wondering why the Joshua Light Show gets that kind of billing. I mean, we were very well respected and we were on all the posters, but this is unusual. The
I'll tell you why here.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because Jimi Hendrix Experience, they had prepared for there to be another act. And the other act, they didn't have another act. It was decided that Jimmy would do the whole show. The designer on a deadline had to fill that space where we would go and the other act. So he just made Joshua Light Show bigger. That's why I have it on my wall.
And Jimi Hendrix, even at this time, was already one of the biggest drawing acts, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was already played on the radio and highly respected, but like Janis, Jimmy was still working in an older design where you go to a theater, an arena, they provide a PA system, you know, it was none of this where you travel with your own sound system. So it was a small, tight combo. And when they played the Fillmore, obviously we were able to do something for the eyes, which is only 50% of experience. We're able to do something that made the music just sound that much better.
The other 50% being
the other 50%, as we used to say somewhat sarcastically. And we use different techniques to just get it up there. And this is a classic Elliot Landy photograph. And this is the only photograph that I have on my wall, a print he made for me. It's beautiful. And it tells, why? Because it tells a story. That's the reason. It just tells a story. If you wonder what a light show is or was, that's what it was. Try describing that in words. It's amazing what you can do.
Yeah, there's a lot going in there.
I mean, it was everything. I mean, just I have a small collection of books and articles, and they would just they'd come up with all of these euphemisms.
Yeah.
And then they print a picture, which
says way more than any of those words can. Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely multimedia. You've got the Jimi Hendrix in the middle.
There's got to be 20 different projectors, all working to make that one.
To make that happen, yeah.
Really awesome shot. Okay,
that's really great.
Let's get. We're gonna go to technical aspects of the Fillmore.
Oh yes, this is really cool. This was just made for us by Keith Mueller from the Psychedelic Light Show Preservation Society, and he spent a lot of time on this, and this is as far as we can tell, a fairly accurate scale rendition of the Fillmore East, right?
Yeah.
So what Josh gave me this photo last night, and I put it in here over because the one he had was really bad. So this is underneath where all the gear would store.
Oh yes, yeah.
And that's the stage you're changing out, you know, like from one band to another.
I think this was a flash picture Amelie took during a performance.
Yeah, they're switching out.
The audience couldn't see anything like that. In the front of the platform, you could barely see them, are these little tiny lights. They're the lowest thing.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
They were ultraviolet, except they had blue filters. So they were ultra blue.
Okay.
So they weren't hard to look into. But what happened was when you looked up at the stage, you'd only see people in silhouette.
Oh, so the light would sort of blind you from actually seeing the magic behind the
And it was an old theater effect called the light curtain. We didn't invent it, but we perfected it. So what you probably see in this picture is the stagehands really doing what they do.
Yeah.
There's wagons with the drums, it's usually the drums preset. And then the reason Bill has more light on him on the right of the picture is because he was in a follow spot talking to the audience.
Right.
And you would never, the screen would go up, but you would never see what we're seeing in this picture. The light show platform is off the ground.
Yeah, I was very surprised about that because, you know, we've seen so many photos of the Joshua Light Show, but it never occurred to me that it would actually be raised up. It always looks like it's from the ground. So
it was to avoid having scaffolding, which would have taken up 8 feet of stage. And it was
8 feet right there.
Yeah. And the bands can stage their stuff underneath you guys, you know, while they change out bands.
Right. And none of it affected us. We just, whatever they wanted to do was fine. We didn't need, for us to get to the platform, we came through a door in the wall that was, 12 feet off the ground.
And you can see it in the left side of like kind of where number 3 is. That would be that door.
Yeah.
The door is right here.
Yeah. And the other diagram on the left side.
Oh, up here? Oh, right there.
Yeah. So you can see it right there. So there was actual
that was a
space.
hole in the wall.
Yeah.
Had one of those big iron loft doors. And
I see.
theaters had a door from each level, each dressing room level, because sometimes they do shows with balconies and things. And it was a way for people to get onto another level or for stagehands to get up high.
And then the Lumia platform up here.
Yes, above that, which I think we probably have more pictures of it. But
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
we
I
were able
think
to
we
make
might.
another platform smaller for our Lumia artist, Tom Shoesmith, who
Right
basically
here.
never projected directly on the screen.
Yeah.
Just
I think we
bounced
probably
up
have
and
some of those
bounced-
pictures.
Yeah, well,
coming
you
up-
can't
coming
see
up
that
next.
here. Now here is the throw is what, about 15 feet?
Oh
No,
yeah,
no,
it's very
18
very
feet,
close,
18 feet was the throw from the front of the projectors to the screen.
which
But
is
remember,
very
the
close.
projectors are spread out
Yeah.
over a considerable amount of space. So we were able to fill
Right,
the
because they're
whole
also
screen,
wide as well. Like
Right.
your
But-
platform's
right.
wide.
but not
Mhm.
really with one image. I mean, we did, but the problem is it curved up on the left and curved up on the right because it was distorted.
Mhm.
We found out that that didn't really make a difference when you're using liquids. They don't know. Artists didn't know
Right,
it was distorted.
exactly.
So we could do it. We could fill the whole screen.
Yeah.
But we found that it was nicer to make collages. We really enjoyed making collages.
Oh,
Yes.
that's the way to go. And that was, we've talked about this in our other episodes. The importance of collage and to really get a great look is
Yeah.
through that.
Okay, let's get into this one. Here we go. So
Yeah.
this
Okay.
is original.
So this is early on. We're just about to open at the Fillmore, or we just opened, and it says 1967, but in
No,
truth,
it's not.
it was March of '68. And those are the members of the first Joshua Light Show company that played the Fillmore.
Mhm.
There was really just myself, the nerdy guy in glasses with the cool clothes in the back.
Right here.
Mhm.
And then in front of me is Bill Schwartzbach, who was one of the founding geniuses of the show, because Bill sat on the platform doing 4 shows a weekend. And then we had a shop and a studio. Bill would get an idea and we'd talk about it during the show. And then during the week, he'd build it. And then that next weekend, it would be there. The first weekend, it may have been made out of cardboard, but eventually everything was made out of the proper materials. And if you look at the overheads, those are the original Buell overheads. They're made out of metal, so we could keep adjusting them. We could up the light sources because they could support things. A lot of plastic overheads can.
Right.
Right.
Above Bill is an artist named James Nelson.
Mhm.
And to his left is Jane Nelson. They were people I'd worked with and knew, who went on to do other things. They weren't in there for the long run. And then there's a lovely guy, Herb Drywitz, who was also our photographer. And he also did our darkroom prep. And he was with us for a long time, and then he moved to San Francisco. And then the next person is Tom Shoesmith, who was the other person who founded the show. And
Mhm.
Tom, when we did our first show back in Mineola with Frank Zappa, after we did a whole setup, there was nothing for him to do. And I felt bad about that. And I said, here, Tom, here's a mirror. And I had this metal mirror. Here's 3 lights. Go for it. I mean, he knew what the concept was. And he did. And it looked great. And he sat up on his platform, smoking cigarettes, chain smoking. And he just made one image after another, never projecting directly, always bouncing the light off something.
Bouncing the light off something.
Bouncing
yeah.
the light. And that was the basis of one of the legs of the light show that we call Lumia.
Mhm.
Okay, we're going to go to a picture of that. There you go. There he is. There's Tom. Up
There he is.
At the
Okay, now you
top.
get a
That's a
sense
great picture.
of the
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what he's doing up there because I trusted him so much. And he was trained in engineering and the theater. So he just, everybody made just enough money, which was maybe $125, but it was enough money to live in 1968.
Mhm.
And Tom just thought about it all week long and made things. If we could get a commission to make something for money, we did. But mostly it was the Fillmore was our primary job. And so as each concept was discussed, it happened. And you'll notice the 2 overhead projectors by this point are these massive things that
Oh
people
yeah,
have
these
as little
Yeah.
projectors.
There
But
they are.
but Bill just kept working on them and saying, yeah, I would be better if I could do this, be better if I could do that. And then fortunately he could.
And this was Bill that made these, or somebody else
Yes.
made these?
No,
Oh,
no. Bill and Tom made everything. They
Wow.
had people
Wow.
that came into the
Yeah.
shop to do work for them.
yeah.
But
But they did the
designed
design
everything.
and everything. And
Yeah, and they
Can-
designed the way I love the way some of the light show people do, which is they don't draw a lot of plans; they just do it.
Mhm.
You know.
But if we can we talk about these? Because these are some very incredible projectors. I know there's some really cool features about these things.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Well, I know that you guys had different kinds of light sources in them, and you had a mirror that flipped, and we also have this, unusual arm setup
Yep.
where sort of
Okay.
stuff comes down
Yeah,
and
no,
hangs
what
down.
I'll do is I'll say, first of all, that the problem that all light shows had then was power. Is that
Mhm.
not only did you have to have power in order to blast through and for us it was a screen that was a very good screen, but only 70% of the light got through.
Mhm.
And you had to power through it, and there was a lot of ambient light that you had to light the band somehow, and the lights were much less precise, and light floated all over the place, and everybody was very cooperative, and they tried to help. But basically, we just had to have a lot of power. So the first thing that we did was we took the little 600-watt carousels and pumped them up to 1200 watts.
Mhm.
So people
Wow.
were already selling these things.
And was that through a Variac, or what did you guys use?
We just took out the old bulb and put it in.
Lamp. Put
And
a,
Oh,
a
you
lot
changed the
of-
lamp.
And everybody was having this problem. Corporate people were having this
yeah, you
problem.
put a bigger lamp in.
But all the
Right.
solutions that other people were making commercially just were wrong.
Mhm.
They were putting in a big bulb, but the big bulb had a hot spot that was
Mm.
not the same as where it should be. It was a little out. They'd have to build these outboard things to hold the lamp. So
Mhm.
your lamp got brighter, but not significantly brighter. And Bill and Tom came up with a concept where they would just put something on the back of the projector. It was another box that made the projector a third bigger. And inside was the proper 1200 lamp mounted
Mhm.
with whisper
Oh,
fans.
so
And
this
they
was
came up with a concept that I just want to pass on, which was blow the heat away. Is you put one fan blowing in and one fan blowing out, and it just gets you ahead. I tell this to light show people all the time. If you're having heat
Right.
problems, don't start with the lamp. Don't start with glass. Start with
Yeah.
blowing the heat away and see what happens.
Mhm.
Right.
Then eventually they made me the same projector in the center, which is right up in front of me. That was
Yeah.
my special projector, which I use for
Right
concrete
there.
images, which are
Yeah.
all on the wall behind me. That's a light board behind me.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And
what I-
that it did actually light up and illuminate. It said
Yeah.
eventually you didn't need them because you knew where everything was,
Well,
but
no, I mean it lit up, but it was on dimmers, and
it was on dimmers.
again,
Yeah.
we had the kind of control where we when we installed it, we'd go out in the house and have a look and set a level. It was
Mhm.
not complicated. If you saw shadows or it did anything, but we found the right level. What I
Mhm.
was saying about those 1,000 pictures is after a while, I sort of knew where everything was. So we could drop something illustrative or concrete in.
Right.
Right.
The
Right.
primary example, because people know it is you kind of want to have a white on black slide of the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
But if they start playing White Rabbit and you stick a rabbit up in the middle of it,
It's
that's
kind of
easy.
cheesy and obvious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we didn't do that, but every once in a while that rabbit would pop its head out, all by me running that slide projector. Just
Right. So you wouldn't like obviously throw it in the middle of the screen, but you kind of, yeah, sort of use some Lumia or some
Yeah.
kind of reflectives to kind of make it
Right.
kind of appear and come back.
And what happens with the audience is that they're on your side. You're giving them a feast.
Mhm.
So if they if they saw a rabbit, it would all sort of come together, because remember, this was about an acid trip song. So the whole visual would be about acid and a trip and a white rabbit and going down the hole. But in fact, you barely saw the rabbit. It was really
Mhm.
by inference.
Right. Right.
They retained that. And there were scientific terms for that process, none of which I can remember at this hour of the night, but they were good terms. And then the overheads. And the overheads were simply an expansion of an expansion of an expansion.
Yeah.
The reason I have that strange arm is because they would break apart.
I'm gonna go
That
to
arm
that
could
shot.
come off, so we
There
could
you go.
travel.
Mhm.
There's the old overhead you can see, and then on the left is the new overhead.
Yeah.
It was raised and lowered by repurposing tripod, heads where you sort of do this.
Mhm.
The lens, the actual lensing of an overhead is not complicated. So we just
Mhm.
put a big 6-inch lens in there, a crappy lens, convex lens, and a mirror.
Mhm.
And with that, we could swing the head around. Right
Right.
now,
As she's doing there.
what she's doing there is actually doing a liquid plate from the
Mhm.
big projector. She's projecting it into a mirrored wheel that's spinning around. And so you're seeing these mirror ball things, except they're not mirrored ball, and they're not spinning around like a mirrored ball. They're going around like a galaxy. And then she's controlling what's going into it.
And
The older projectors, the original ones, are fun because that was very early in the run. And the color wheels, which you can see, were made out of hula hoops. I just want to point that out. They were hula hoops, because that was all we could figure out for the time. So that was the original color wheels and a motor.
Can we go back one more? Because there's one more thing that about your projectors that I find very interesting.
Sure.
So my understanding is that you guys actually had two different lamps, one on each side with a mirror that would turn at different angles.
Yeah,
and
that's why they're so wide.
Right.
Aside from the fact that they provide a proper place for the artist to lean, and it's a working space. If you look on the top of the projector, right in the center of the frame, there's his bottles right there. You don't have to turn around; they're right there.
Yeah. Oh,
And
they're
then-
right there
and
on
then-
the projector. Yeah.
Yeah, everywhere. They
Yeah.
were everywhere. And then they'd clean them up and they'd start again. The projectors, what they did was, what Bill designed with Tom was they put in the brightest lamp they could find. It was a 28 volt par 56 lamp that was an aircraft landing light, extremely narrow. And that was in one side. The other side, and it was hot, and heat was a problem that also worked for us. In other words, whatever you put, if you just put a regular plate down, it would start to boil.
It would start boiling.
But you could use it.
And I've seen this in your shows where you guys do an amazing effect that I don't think I've seen anybody else do, where you sort of just have like a dish and you have some, colors, and the light will create a convection current that will kind of go around and come through the center and come back out.
It's not a dish, it's a tank.
It's a tank, right. It's a big,
so that there's room for stuff to move around. And the heat from the lamp caused the oil and the water, which had different colors, to move around in exotic ways, which for us was perfect because it was about the center. So the center was the hottest.
Yeah, and it looks like I have too bad we can't get a video of it, but it's amazing. It looks like an exploding star or something like that. It's a really pretty effect.
And then Bill Graham loved that we were showing cartoons during the breaks, because some of these breaks could be quick, but every once in a while there'd be a band from England. This was their first stop, and international touring was just beginning. So they'd show up with their Hammond organ that ran on 50 cycles, and it wouldn't work on 60 cycles. But we had guys that could figure it out, but sometimes they'd have to do that in front of the audience. So we began to show films and cartoons, and Bill, bless his heart, bought us the most powerful projector at the time, which had the discharge lamp in it. It was called
and this is the one at the bottom.
That's what you see at the bottom. And we used it, and it had a very wide angle lens, but between the lens and the special bulb, the discharge lamp, we were able to make an image absolutely big enough to please the audience. And then we realized right away that lamp, which has to be fired by a power supply that's under the projector, was not working for 90% of the evening. So we just reached down, unplugged the lamp without moving it, and put a same lamp up in the projectors. So that you turn the projector on, and instead of the light coming on in the projector, it came on in the overhead. And the reason for the mirror inside, the 45-degree mirror, was so that you could go from one to another, not necessarily during a show in front of the audience, but as you set up your projector, you could choose hot or cold.
Right. Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have to give up any of our old stuff, the way we put images on the projector, because anything we put on the projector that was flat or not oil and water in glass would just crackle up and burn.
Here's a liquid shot. I think it's kind of cool.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Get the idea. Maybe this sort of boiling liquid thing.
Yep.
And this is actually you standing on the floor behind the screen, right?
On the right, I'm actually, we took this picture because, again, I felt there was always a problem of explaining to people what the light show was and explaining the scale of it. So I took some pictures where I'm standing
big.
On a weekday night in front of the screen to show how big it was and how bright it was. Because that's a real picture.
That's quite big.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, here's a shot of this was probably from the Iron Butterfly album cover session.
Oh yeah.
They're so wearing the same
Which we
clothes.
talked about in episode 1.
And that's your boiling liquids or just a squash plate liquid. I don't know.
That early in the game, I would say it was just liquids, but probably double liquids. What gives it away to me is, first of all, they recorded the album very early in our run. We hadn't figured out how to expand the light show yet, but we could do double liquids, and in the liquids they'd have dark and light, so that they would reveal and hide each other. But the circle gives it away. That was how we had to do it. But again, the audience, they didn't know anything else. They were happy with it, and we were happy with it.
Okay, here's your liquid room.
Oh wow.
That's Cecily, and Cecily was our hero because she was in the show almost from the beginning, but she's the one who'd come in during the week, go down to the cellar, the dungeon cellar of the Fillmore East, boil oil, and not just oil, but oil of different densities depending on what the principal light artist Bill Schwartzbach asked for. Who knew it came in light, medium, and heavy?
Yeah. There's different viscosities of oil. Yeah.
Right. And she'd go down there, boil this stuff, and then mix in aniline dyes.
Yep. You can see on the left there, Bacco anilines.
Bachmeyer dyes. That was what it's available. And their dyes, you call them up and you said, I want this to dye oil, and you get it. And I want this to dye water, and you get it.
Yeah, these are the watercolors right here.
I mean, we also use traditional Dr. Martin's watercolors because they've been around forever. But the point was that she had to produce gallons of colors down there. She had to keep everything, up to date because of the artist. She was one, but Bill was famous for just pouring stuff down.
So
he made the plates. He made where he'd bring the projector up and he'd pour oil and water in the top, and it would slide down.
Pour it right over the projector.
into a catchy.
No, in the plates,
yeah. But it was a stunning effect.
Yeah. That's cool. So you guys had a chemistry lab downstairs, and I know you also you guys also had a dark room on the premises as well, right?
Yeah, we had a dark room. Really, it was in our studio, but if we had to, we could use the dark room. The dark room wasn't for processing photographs. It was for printing if we needed. But what it was really used for was making our slides and making overhead mats.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that. So on Thursday, when I knew what we were doing, we'd make up a series of things like titles for the bands, any messages, and we'd set them all using the movable type
it's so valuable that you guys had, the ability to do that.
Totally, because it gave us, I could do anything. If I saw a picture that I thought was fun, I could say, make me a codolith of this. And there'd be a hand. If I wanted Cecily's hand just to be across the top of the screen, it was done by someone who was paid a retainer. His name was Eddie Chin, paid a retainer, and he came in to do that one gig on Thursday, make our slides. And then he would process them. Also, color slides would come back from the lab. So I spent part of Friday in a little tiny room at the Fillmore mounting slides, spooling up film loops, things like that.
Okay, here
The point was we were there all the time. It's permanent use of the space. I would never have done what I've done had that not been the reality there.
Right.
There's a slide you guys made right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that perfect example. And we made many different versions of this. Right. And what's moving around the edges is one of Tom's Lumias, but it's just running by itself because we're not out there yet. I determined early on, and everyone agreed, that our responsibility with the audience began when you came through the door.
Right. It's theater. You want to give them a show that's, again, contrasting to the ballroom experience. This is,
that's right. And when the band took the stage, the slide would fade out, and then those lights, which were the ultra blue lights I described earlier, would just pop off.
Yep.
Total darkness. Bill would introduce the band, and the first thing that would happen is a slide with their name on it would come up on the screen. And we could do whatever we wanted. We fulfilled our obligations in terms of doing stuff until the very end when we knew it was their last number, which usually was big and ended with a blackout, and their name would come up on the screen again. It was all the bookends, the theatrical disciplines that really made it work.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to interrupt for a second. Okay, so we're at a 45-minute mark, and we're going to do a second half of the show, and it's going to be primarily color. It's going to have to do with a lot of Lumia and pictures of bands and stuff like that.